Welcome to the Dead Pixel Society podcast, the photo imaging industry's leading news source. Here's your host, Gary Pajot. The Dead Pixel Society podcast is brought to you by Media Clip, Advertech Printing, and Independent Photo Imagers.
Hello again, and welcome to the Dead Pixel Society podcast. I'm your host, Gary Pajot, and today we're joined by Larry O'Connor, who's the founder and CEO of Otherworld Computing, or as most people know it these days, OWC. Hi, Larry. How are you today?
Doing great, Gary. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate being here.
So you've been in the computer hardware world almost as long as there have been computers. Can you talk a little bit about the founding of the company in terms of, where you came from and starting the business back in 1988?
It's always been about giving users more from the technology that they have. Where can we push the envelope and just let you do more? And back in 1988, there was a lot of untapped opportunity with memory upgrades, later storage that, Apple made it seem very complicated, focus on Apple, and we made it really, really simple. But it was all about, again, these are great machines. Let's make them do more. Let's let the users do more with what they already have.
And yeah, I've noticed that because as I mentioned earlier, I've bought a few things from you guys over the years. And it's always been kind of Mac focused, but you have other memory products. And that seems to be like the main focus has been the memory piece, which has always been I wouldn't say a challenge, especially in the early days of Macs. They were almost, I wouldn't say underpowered, but underutilized. What was the reason you decided to focus on that market as opposed to even at 1988, I think the DOS market was probably larger.
Well, I was an Apple user.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I was my own customer. I mean, this was something that I needed.
Right.
And looking at how, for all practical purposes, how easy it was. This is something that anybody could do at home. And it was such an easy way to substantially improve the performance of the computer you already had. And as opposed to having to spend, whatever number of time ripping your computer apart, driving it into an Apple store, leaving it there for a couple of days, this is something you could do in less than 10 minutes in your house.
Right.
In your business, where you were. And this was, it just made a ton of sense. And that's how we got started.
Did you start as like a shop that would repair people's Macs and then got into mail order, or were you always providing components?
Started right in the components. Yeah. It was something to me, to me, it was just highway robbery, what was happening with service, especially what they charged.
Yeah.
How long it took. And it was something that this was something very easy to do. So this is also where OWC became very educational. It wasn't just selling the product. It was also putting out documentation and explaining, hey, this is how you do it. These are the benefits. This is why you want to do this. And hey, if you break a chip, I remember the first customer that we shipped to, one of the first customers was worried, well, what if I break a chip? I said, well, it costs more to pay somebody to install it than to buy another set of memory. You're not going to break a chip. This is back in the SIMs and individual, depending on what computer you had, is either the chips or the SIMs. But this is really easy, nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
And that's off to the races. Then got into external storage. I mean, everybody needed more storage.
Yeah.
And actually in 1992, OWC had the very first bus-powered hard drives. Before anybody had bus-powered drives. Back in the day, there were floppy drives.
Right.
So everybody had a floppy drive port. Our hard drives powered off the floppy port. They were SCSI drives that used the power off the floppy port to power up. So very cost-effective, very convenient, and looked like a 3.5-inch floppy drive back in the day.
Which, I'm envisioning several of perhaps our younger listeners running around going, what's SCSI, what's floppy? I mean, these are all antiquated phrases these days, but it was really quite difficult back then to add peripherals and components because of the varying, standards. It wasn't plug and play certainly back then in those days.
Yeah, there are a few more certainly barriers. I mean, it wasn't super difficult. But like everything, there were these barriers, and if nothing else, just these misconceptions of maybe perhaps why you shouldn't do it or why it was difficult to do. And again, our goal was to make this as easy as possible and show people the light so that they could take advantage again. I mean, unleash the beast and those great Macs that they had.
You started in Illinois, but you're worldwide now. How did that evolution take place? Because I mean, certainly there were a lot of years there where Apple was struggling even to stay alive. Like in the 90s, there was a lot of issues there. Was that a concern for you, or did your growth kind of parallel Apple's growth? Because, I've read the biographies. I was around back in the day. There were a lot of years when, Apple wasn't selling a lot of Macs back then. There were some challenges.
In good years and in difficult years, people always need to get more from the technology that they've already purchased.
Right, right,
So
right.
focusing on the upgrade space, I mean, we were always what people needed. And quite honestly, we were doing this. I mean, again, we were our own customers. We
Hmm.
enjoyed doing this. We certainly absolutely benefit from the growth of Apple.
Hmm.
But even when Apple was struggling, there was such a large market opportunity. I mean, there's just so much you can do with these machines that nobody was doing at that time.
Hmm.
And honestly, we were there to open doors. And like I said, we were our own customers. Our
Hmm.
customers also gave us great feedback. There was,
Hmm.
again, the world was pretty wide open. When it absolutely helped when the jobs came back and got on the right track, to say the least. That created, an opportunity for explosion. But even before that, hey, these were always
Hmm.
Apple's long built, some of the best, machines in the world, period.
Hmm.
And having the opportunity to make those machines better, hey, that was what we were there for.
But also part of the challenge you've got though, as a accessory maker is, the reality is they've closed up the machines now. I mean, you can't pry open a MacBook like you used to and insert more memory in. Not easily. It's much more difficult than it used to because they either want you to, it's sealed tight. So when did you realize you needed like kind of pivot a little bit from that?
Well, if you look at the history of OWC, I mean, it started in memory,
Mm.
got into external storage, actually, and then in the early 2000s, we were the first company to have, how do I say, some firewire storage for off-record purposes, and
Hmm.
that was a great avenue to externally
Hmm.
upgrade systems. Processor upgrades, first company to actually really dive into processor upgrades in the late 90s. I mean, this is, there's always these different steps on the way. And if you go back about, it's already now about 15 years, got into solid state drives, got into Thunderbolt. And today, you're right, there's actually, you can't even upgrade the memory of these systems.
Right.
And upgrading solid state, I mean, there's ways to do it, but the reality is you really can't get the flash that you need to do the upgrades. Not in volume is very difficult because I'll just leave it like this. It's without throwing others under the bus. It's a very proprietary flash
Right.
is using these. And unfortunately, it's just not something you really can get your hands on.
Right. Yeah.
But Thunderbolt opened up brand new paths, starting again, about 15 years ago
Yeah.
to expand machines externally. So what you couldn't put inside systems, you could connect externally. And that's, I mean, it's really, and again, you go, anybody who's, today buying a Mac, even a PC for operating purposes, what you can do with a Thunderbolt cable,
Hmm.
it's really, I mean, to somebody, 20 years ago, it's almost unimaginable
Oh, sure.
that with the simple cable, what was fast, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
doesn't even hold the can. I mean, I mean, it's today Thunderbolt is a blink in terms
Mhm.
of how much faster it is by comparison. And it's just a simple cable. You can plug it in. There's no direction to it. You don't have to worry about lining anything up. It plugs in whichever way you want to plug it in.
Yep.
And it just goes, that's
And
really
it,
where,
yeah,
Mhm.
and it's faster, it's universal, and you can do different things with it. It's a power cable as well as a data transfer cable and other things.
Yeah, actually, an advantage. I mean, it's something our customers, a lot of our customers take advantage of with Thunderbolt.
Mhm.
Single cable that works for everything.
Right.
If you're on a trip, I bring a Thunderbolt cable because I can use it for power, I can use it for data, and I
Mhm.
never have to worry about what I'm using it for.
Mhm.
Anything that's C to C, if it's a Thunderbolt cable, Thunderbolt 4 cable, Thunderbolt 5 cable, will
Mhm.
give me the maximum performance
Mhm.
and maximum power, maximum data. It works with everything. If I pull out a USB C to C cable, I got to really make sure that cable is compatible. A lot of C to C cables are just power. I mean, people, the number one tech support call that we still get is from somebody who's using typically their Apple cable, their Apple C to C cable that came with their power adapter, and they're trying to connect a dock or a data device.
Mhm.
And it's a really high quality cable. The only problem is it's just built for power. Every cable, though, the C to C has to do at least USB 2. So you get this little bit of data stream, which is what's used also to navigate power delivery. But when
Right.
you plug it into the device, if it even registers, it's like, what's going on here? I mean, it's barely working. It's like, And or especially with the dock. I mean, some of the questions, and I'd never assumed this. We had a customer who had an iMac and a MacBook Air. We'll never forget it. It was after an Apple update. The assumption was, I mean, the customer had assumed this was pushing as hard that something broke badly with their iMac. It's like, this doesn't make any sense. It's working fine with their MacBook Air. It doesn't work with their iMac. And I can't take credit for our tech support. So I'm just turning over to our product. I don't know what's going on here. He was using his Apple cable. He was using a different cable. He was taking the dock back and forth, not the laptop back and forth. He was just using the Apple power cable. So, yeah, that would barely work. That's the problem. But Thunderbolt makes it so easy. Thunderbolt cables especially take the guesswork out. I mean, if you are a mission creator, you want to be in a situation where you don't have to think about what you're connecting or connecting with. Thunderbolt cables just always work. And Thunderbolt is an amazing, fantastic technology. USB-C, and hey, we sell USB-C. USB-C is just a connector. I should actually kind of clarify that. USB devices really aren't certified. If it's Thunderbolt, it's certified. You got to be very careful who you buy a USB product from because there's a lot of variability and there's even some risk in using just USB. Thunderbolt guaranteed to work.
You could use, for example, if you were connecting a USB-C device you can connect that to a Thunderbolt dock, right, through a cable. I mean, they're not incompatible. It's just the other way around might be a challenge.
Correct. Yeah, you can't plug a Thunderbolt device into a USB-only system.
Right.
But of course, you can plug a USB into pretty much anything. And you can use a Thunderbolt cable. If it connects C to C, if it's a C connection on both ends, you can use a Thunderbolt cable to connect any device that's C to C.
It's kind of good this stuff is settling down. I mean, I know, Apple was thrilled with, the Lightning, cable for a while because it was proprietary. And I believe it had more to do with the EU telling them they needed to do USB-C that kind of forced them to kind of adopt Thunderbolt, which I think is going to benefit everybody in the long run.
It's always tough when, this proprietary separate interface. I kind of understood what Apple was doing with Lightning. They had some pretty cool things enabled, with that Lightning chip and some security. But of course, they could integrate that into the system, into the silicon on chip with C to C. So, they made the transition and we're all USB-C now. And it is certainly simpler. Like I said, my iPhone, when I'm on a trip, I'm using a Thunderbolt cable to charge my iPhone.
Yeah. You can bring far fewer things for the consumer, certainly. I mean, and then if you lose it and you need to go to an airport kiosk to get a replacement, it's easier to get as opposed to, I mean, how many flavors of USB were there for a while there? I mean, there was the mini, the micro. I mean, there were like 7 different kinds at one point. It was crazy.
There are a few, many, Type B, and then the micro, the trapezoid, the big one. It was,
it was crazy. So let's talk a lot about how, people who are kind of in the creative world are using your products, right? A lot of my audience are the people who are service creators or whatever, and working with choosing devices, attaching different devices. These days with Lightning, you're not going to get a performance hit by attaching multiple devices to one of your docks, right? Because the throughput is so great.
Correct. Depends. I mean, if you look at our own media cards, we're providing ingest speeds, on a Type A card of up to almost 2,000 megs a second, and a Type B card approaching 4,000 megs a second. SD, of course, is a lot slower. I mean, you're less than 500 megs a second.
Right.
But in terms of the performance, when you plug in multiple things into a dock, yes, there's plenty of bandwidth to share, and it's bi-directional, which also makes a big difference. Time is, I think, the most important thing that creators value a lot more, especially in the bigger shoots. I mean, if you're doing, rapid stills, there's so much more video being shot, even for photographers. And if you can cut that ingest time down from 20 minutes down to 10 minutes down to 5 minutes, which requires fast storage as well as a fast reader, that makes a big difference. I mean, that's more time to be out there.
Because then, a lot of these folks, time is money, and if they're opting for budget cards, they're actually costing themselves whatever time they probably would have been saving buying a name brand card.
Well, it's more than that, though. If you look at, again, I'll plug our Atlas cards.
A plug is okay, so please.
Well, we were the first kind to bring out PCI Gen 4 cards, which for the cameras, you see all the compatibility. You're going to get the max. Whatever the different modes your camera supports, that's not the issue. The benefit becomes on the ingest side. I mean, you're ingesting at two to four times the speed that you do with a lot of other cards. So you're getting the data onto your drive off that card at a much higher speed, a much higher velocity. The other piece of the equation that comes with the Atlas cards is Energize.
Mm.
And what Energize allows, for lack of a better way to really explain this, and again, when we got into the space, we looked at two things. The first thing we looked at, hey, we've been building solid state drives for a very long time. This is a relatively easy space for us to come into. It wasn't that easy as it would turn out. By the time when we did come into the game, I mean, the different modes, the performance demands on cards, it's insane, what cameras do today versus even 5 years ago.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But the certification, we don't lean on other people's specs. I mean, we bring in all the cameras. We're red certified on cards that work with red. We don't just kind of, put them, say, we match the specs.
Yeah.
We actually do the testing and develop firmware to ensure that there's complete reliability with every mode on the cameras that we list as compatible. So we haven't just said they're compatible because a certain speed's met. These are actually tested, extensively tested in these cameras.
Mm-hmm.
But the other big piece that, and this is another reason we got into this space, we looked at how much waste and how much and again, we are a waste not, want not type of organization. I mean, that's why we looked at upgrading, enhancing systems. We want people to get the most from their investment. And it's crazy how many camera cards are put up on a shelf thinking that they're bad. They've reached the end of their life when it just has to do with the cache being dirty on these cards.
Okay.
OWC brought out the Atlas series. We also released with no cost a software application called Energize. And what Energize enables is you to sanitize the card and restore the factory original performance within about 3 to 5 seconds. It does a complete clean wipe of the card, and it resets the card, cleans the cache, so that card gives you the same performance as it did the very first time you used it. When cards start to get a little choppy or you see the frame rate start to go down, typically that has nothing to do with the card's lifespan.
Right, because there's not really moving parts. I mean, you would think it would be.
Well, it is a consumable. I mean, you typically, with heavy use, you're still talking years before you actually exhaust that flash lifespan.
Right.
But the cache gets dirty. There's no trim. There's no interface for the card with via USB or on the camera, effectively to clean itself up, to clear the cache and reorganize the blocks on the card. And I don't want to get crazy into the weeds, but at the end of the day, you see these cars slowing down. It's just because the card needs to be cleaned. And nobody actually enables this. I guess I say there's 1.5 companies other than us that sort of promote it. We're the only company to provide a free utility. And the big guys, and I won't mention them I won't even put them out there. I think their game is driven by continuing to sell cars, drive cars to their existing audience.
Right.
People always need more cars. There's so many customers out there. We want our cars to be used to their full lifespan, not replaced or put on a shelf just because somebody thinks something's that it's time. We provide a utility, sanitize, resets the card to factory, restores performance. You don't have to do it every time. Head to head, even without our software, we go longer. We've built cars to be more reliable than our competition. Energize means those cards will give you a longer useful life because you can always keep them fresh. And the health check on the card, which is another thing built into our cards, allows you to, again, with the same, easy click, within a second say, hey, okay, it is 90, 95% or 80% or 70% of this event lifetime. So you have the confidence to continue shooting with it. We heard from so many photographers and videographers that they see an issue with the card, they think there's an issue with the card, it goes on a shelf and they buy another one. And I get that. You cannot lose a moment. Our goal is to make sure you don't lose a moment, but you're not, again, retiring. You're not spending.
You're not losing the card too early.
Right. I can't even make up an analogy, but you can look at your tires in your car and your tires are good. Or,
right. Yeah.
With the card, but you don't throw the car away because it needs to go through a car wash effectively.
Right. Yeah.
And there's so many cars memory cards, camera cards that do get shelved, early just because, they just needed a quick cleaning.
Removal media today is so much more reliable than it used to be. Even most, I think, problems could be taken care of even with just reformatting the card as you may need to.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey, are you trying to build an audience, to create engaging content, and to drive views? Well, then the Audience Connection podcast is just for you. I'm Lydia Chan, host of the Audience Connection podcast, where I talk to expert storytellers and leaders from brands like BuzzFeed, Ancestry, The Trade Desk, and many more about how to create content that truly connects and drives engagement. Every other week, each guest brings their insights and practical advice on how you can make your content go further. So if that's important to you and your job, click the link in the show notes and follow the Audience Connection podcast today.
You can do on cars that don't have a sanitize. Again, you can do a low-level format that does use a complete write cycle, and you have limited write cycles of that nature on a card. And that's something that can take. It depends on the size of the card. It can. I mean, it could be an hour. It could be a few hours. And again, the benefit to me is the benefit of us with Energize, where we provide a solution that, hey, we know what's going on with the card. This is how the technology works. You've been using this card for 3 months, a year, whatever it might be, depending on how heavy or light your use is. Run Energize, click this button, 5 seconds later, the card is at full performance.
Because it seems like, I think there may be other people out there who just say, okay, that's fine. We just get a new card. We want you to use it more like a consumable. But I think that's sort of a closed loop thinking, in the sense that I think as people are capturing more and more images, right? There's more and more video being captured. There's more and more images being captured, that there's just more demand for more storage, just more things. So I think that's sort of a closed way of thinking about it, is that, we kind of want our stuff to be somewhat erratic so that people will buy more, when you really don't have to think like that. It's almost an abundance mentality.
Sure. What's interesting, I mean, they've allowed this to be the consideration. Oh, my car is starting to get a few less frames per second when I'm doing those big capture shots. It must be time for me to replace my card. They've not corrected the consumer and said, well, you can low-level format. They've also not, they call it lazy, in my opinion. They've not released a utility to really provide proper management of that card. The third thing that we do is provide firmware updates. So a new camera comes out, it may require some special, some special sauce for this mode or that mode. An existing camera may have a firmware update that fixes a mode or makes an adjustment that could negate compatibility with a card for a certain setting. And the other thing Energize does that we provide with our cards are free firmware updates. Even last year, we worked with one of the manufacturers. We knew they had a bug in their camera. We knew there was going to be a fix coming out. When they released a fix, we released an update that flashed that you had our card and you had a reader. It was a very easy update to continue to have compatibility with the new mode in that camera, with the full proper operation of that mode in this particular camera. You should not have to worry about what cards are compatible, if your card is going to be compatible with a future camera. If it meets a certain spec, the manufacturer, I mean, there's a few years ago, there was a firmware change, and customers, none of our product, and we didn't have the product at the time, but the situation was you had to figure out what serial numbers were compatible. After it broke compatibility, if you had this. If you're a creative, you want to worry about being out there in the field, taking the best shots, not having to worry about what card is going to work, how long it's going to work. And quite frankly, there's plenty of other things you can make, should be investing in, not looking at a card that should last years as a consumable. When it starts to do things that, when it starts to show, well, just signs that it needs some TLC, maybe after a few months of heavy use.
And, the reality is, most people should be taking care of their gear regularly anyway. If you're using a camera, you should be cleaning the lens and make sure that, the contacts on the bayonet mount are fine and all of those things. So, card care is one of those things that you should just normally be doing, right?
It should be. And again, this is something that, we educate and we always are sharing, and we've made it very, very easy. So the short answer is yes. And it's just something you just need to know you need to do. If you've always been told this is just a consumable issue, it's just consumption, it's time to replace the card. You're just doing what you've always done. And that's where we get into trouble. And when we came into the space, it wasn't just about being another brand in the space. We wanted to do it better.
Right.
So we innovated with higher performance on our cards, I mean, toe to toe, head to head with anybody out there. We in the real world with compatibility and performance, we come out on top. And then we add this other layer where, hey, no, you know how your existing cards might perform. You see things over the course of time. You don't have to put up with that with our cards. You run Energize, and you can always keep those cards at full performance. It's a good security thing too. If you're sharing cards with other people and you don't necessarily want to share your project, worry about your data being shared. The sanitize also, in addition to resetting the card to best performance, is a clean wipe of the card as well. There won't be any media to recover by accident. If you're using cards sharing cards with other photographers, videographers.
Now, one of the things that's changed over the years, going back to, that old days of early computer components, of course, was, hard drives failed a lot. And nowadays with SSDs and other technology, you don't really run into that. Part of my audience are folks who do photo organizing, photo management for people. And some of them are looking for solutions for, in addition to cloud storage. They always recommend store your images in multiple places once you've, got your family archive. Really, SSDs and some of the products you have are suitable for that as well, right?
Yeah, well, the first thing I say is the wrong hard drives might fail a lot, but quality solutions have
right. Yeah. Well, I'm saying back in the day they used to fail a lot, right? I mean, that was always one of the.
No, yeah. I would honestly strongly disagree with that. I mean, we've been building drives since the 90s. It has to do, there's so many variables, but the right drive mechanism, and probably one of the most important things, and this goes for SSDs as well. I mean, some of our friends had problems a year ago, and it comes down to overall design, componentry, and the power supply as well. There are so many solutions that are underpowered. When I say underpowered, you use a small, for spinning drives especially, but they use an underpowered adapter. And you put a lot of stress on the circuitry when you're using a power supply that has to go into a peak output mode. If you're in the audio space, you want an amplifier that has plenty of headroom beyond your listening level. Because if you're turning it to the maximum to hear it where you want to hear it, you get a lot of distortion.
Right.
Power supplies are effectively the same situation, except for that distortion can wreak havoc on the electronics. It beats them up for all practical purposes. It creates probabilities of failure that you don't have when you have a robust power supply with plenty of headroom where it's operating in a standard. When you got to use peak power to spin up a drive, that's stressful on the circuitry, and that does lead to more failures. But going into SSDs, solid state drives, certainly from a physical point of view, there's nothing spinning. A hard drive is just, people bumping them, dropping them, things happen by accident, like something that's rotational and it's mechanical, and there's all the probabilities with something that's constantly spinning. But there's not, from a reliability point of view, drives are still a very large part of our offering.
But what I'm saying is that even almost for archival purposes, right? You'll probably be able to use that drive, a solid state drive, in 10 years. If you put your family archive in there and then want to access it in 10 years, assuming there's a cable somewhere that'll attach to the Mac, the 2035 Mac, that it'll probably work.
Well, a hard drive's the same way. In fact, there's two things. If you use the SSD as archival, you still want to energize that drive. Probably, well, I think it's 3-4 years. If you go, and again, it's all about probabilities, but typically you want to energize that drive. If you go more than 2-3 years, certainly, actually really more than a year or so without energizing an SSD, you start to run the risk of data loss. 5 years, 10 years without power up, there's the probabilities of that, I say, a bit drift, and that's probably not the right term, but at the end of the day, issues with the data that's stored on that drive do increase. With a hard drive, you have a different kind of issue. You have capacitors and other parts to support the mechanics that they're not energized. They can, when they lose their charge, they actually can dry up. But if you power those units up once a year, for example, a hard drive can last a very, very, very long time. We still have customers running drive. If you're using a drive constantly, our recommendation certainly is, as you go past 3-4 years, it's time to replace that drive as a primary drive and make sure that you move it to secondary or tertiary and shift to something else for your primary data. But ultimately, hard drives can last, if maintained and they're not being used, constantly. They'll last certainly as long as an SSD.
Wow. Okay.
But any of these things, you need to energize them. Don't take an SSD, load it with data, stick it in a safety deposit box, and come back 10 years later.
Right.
Power it up at least Ideally power it up once a year. Just energize it, mount it. You can put it away at that point, but just energize it. And same with the hard drive. Keep the electronics fresh for all practical purposes.
I'm getting a continuous thread from you that proper care of your electronics extends their life, right? I mean, that seems to be something that kind of has gone through the through point of all of this discussion. And you provide tools for this for SSDs and smaller things. What other software do you have? I mean, I saw on your site you've got quite the list of software. Are they all in this vein?
Data is probably one of our most prevalent areas. We have copy that, which provides checksum ingest of data off cards and duplication, make sure everything that comes off the memory card is exactly what it should have been. Soft RAID provides very high performance, RAID. I mean, it allows you to buy multiple drives, whether SSDs or hard drives, for higher performance.
Right.
But not like a lot of RAID applications. This also provides advanced health monitoring. By the time smart QC drive is failing, you've already experienced problems.
Right. Yeah.
Software tells you before a drive has failed that we're predicting a failure while the drive is still working, gives you time to replace. And then there's Mac Drive. One of the things that just kills me in this out there is unfortunately for camera cards, you're still using exFAT. And exFAT is fine in small doses. You start to get the larger volumes, it can become a problem. And you don't want to edit or use exFAT as a main drive ever on Mac or PC.
Right.
It's really nice to be able to go between platforms, but we provide Mac Drive. Mac Drive is an application that lets you use APFS, which is the modern file system natively on Windows, so that whether you're on an iPad or you're on a Mac or a PC, you can take those volumes. And software, by the way, does this as well, but you can plug and play a Mac volume on a PC Windows system, just like it, with the same performance, with the same plug and play response,
right,
as if it's a native PC volume. Just don't use exFAT to edit. I mean, please don't. I mean, convenient. But exFAT's one of those things, I mean, and we've seen it where, especially as the volumes go up, the loss risk substantially increases. And it's not, I mean, you'll see an exFAT drive just flake out on one system. You plug it into another system, it'll sort of work. It'll work where you can at least read the data off, but 5 minutes before that, it absolutely wouldn't show up no matter what you did on system A. Moving to system B, it's a file system with no protections. NTFS, you're on Windows, APFS if you're on Mac. If you have to use back Windows and or iPad, use APFS because it's a modern file system with protections that you absolutely want.
It seems like you're providing a lot of insight and help. I mean, that is one of the things that OWC is known for, is kind of customer education, customer training. Do you have regular like webinars and classes for people, or how do you convey this to your customers?
We should. We try to make it easy. A lot of these things are just plug and play and go, but we absolutely, need to do more to get the word out. I mean, we take this stuff for granted. It's interesting. I think, 10, 15 years ago, you need to learn a lot more about your Mac or PC and your data, your camera, all these things, just to use the technology. Today, things are so plug and play that I think we really take it for granted.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
There is some care and there's some things you can do so that things last longer. And even if it doesn't affect the longevity, you have just better data stability and, quite frankly, better performance from very, very simple things you can do.
Because it is shocking to me that technology has permeated people's lives, right? People just expect things to work all the time, right? And the thing is, it mostly does. You can mostly do things, like you said, without much problems. But I remember back in the day where, Windows did not talk to Mac at all. And there was a lot of juggling between that. And nowadays it's a lot simpler, a lot of more cross-platform opportunities there.
Well, it's interesting. We used to have to, again, to optimize the workflow. I guess I'll just summarize like this. Things are so fast today, even if you're not getting all that you could, maybe it feels fast enough. You don't know what you're missing because it's so fast. Maybe what you're comparing to.
Right.
So again, our goal with everything we offer is to provide real world performance. It is plug and play, with, quite frankly, as little effort as possible, because we want to be the boring part. It's the stuff that just has to work.
Yeah.
And simple guidelines. You rotate the tires in your car. There's little things you can do.
Oil change, check the fluid, all that stuff.
I even say, I would compare, honestly, OWC gear. This might not be the right time to mention this company, but I would compare, if you look at internal combustion versus a Tesla.
Yeah.
Teslas require very little service. You still got the brakes to worry about. You got to make sure keep your brakes good, although regenerative braking eliminates a lot of even wear on the brakes. But rotate the tires, replace the tires, and that's OWC gear.
Right.
All the other things, the transmission fluid, the oil, a lot of the other hassles, you don't have to worry about with our stuff.
Yeah.
But the little things that you can do, you should do. I mean, well, again, on a car you have to do.
Right.
With our stuff, you can get away without doing. But you do the extras.
Extending the life.
You're extending the life, and you're getting more from it. If you don't do those things, quite frankly, you're still getting a better experience than pretty much 99% of what else is out there. I mean, we have such amazing technology from Apple, even from Intel. I mean, in the world today that is easy to take for granted. I mean, there's more than we need. There's, you said earlier, there's abundance here. But you, quite frankly, use that abundance correctly, it costs you less. You get more done. You can spend more time on your creative work, not having to worry about the technology. And you can sleep more at night because stuff you buy the right stuff, things ingest faster, things edit faster, things work better, and you're spending time, doing the things you want to do, not chasing problems that, require solutions. So plug and play and go and go fast and create more.
Speaking of going, where can people go for more information about OWC and some of the stuff you offer?
Sure. OWC.com is a great resource, a great page to start at. MaxSales.com, places like B&H Photo, and quite honestly, hey, I'm always happy to field questions on LinkedIn as well.
Great, Larry. Great to see you. Happy that you shared some. I learned a couple of things, which is always a good thing when I do these. I appreciate your time and look forward to talking to you again.
Yeah, likewise, Gary. Thanks for having me on. And hey, anytime. Love sharing is well, this is our passion. Everybody that we see, myself included, of course.
Thank you for listening to the Dead Pixel Society podcast. Read more great stories and sign up for the newsletter at www.thedeadpixelssociety.com.